Welcome to John Martin Talks, where we battle ignorance and apathy daily. The growing ignorance of just how special this experiment we call the United States of America is, and the apathy that we can't or won't do anything and everything to save her. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we got a great show for you today. We're going to start out. Before we go any further, I want to tell you we reached a little bit of a milestone, maybe. I'm not sure exactly how to take it. But we had one of our videos removed from YouTube. And I can't give you the exact number right now. It slips my mind. But it was a show. I remember it pretty well. We did it probably a month and a half ago. And it was about Ocasio-Cortez and her talking about white supremacists inside the United States Capitol. And I'm not talking about the insurrection. I'm talking about members, primarily, I guess, GOP members, were white supremacists. And we talked about that. And, but apparently that is a violation somehow. And I got to kind of rewatch the show and maybe appeal it. They're not suspending us yet. They basically just removed the video and gave a warning. Well, you know, I got to say that if a show of mine is too over the top for the censors, then I'm not sure what we can actually do about that. So we're determined to stay on social media, on every platform we possibly can be on. But we're under attack. Make no mistake about it. Does that mean we've arrived? I don't know. We've been in Facebook jail before. Algorithm, I want to give due deference to him. Now we've actually had a video removed from YouTube. And for the life of me, I really can't figure out what is so wrong with anything we say. Now, I may have a difference of opinion, but if you're new to the show, or certainly if you've been watching it, then you'll know that essentially what our format here is that we take stories of the day, sometimes stories that I think need to be on your radar screen, but we don't create stories. We're not a breaking news organization. I use actual stuff, and usually from very liberal publications like the New York Times or Politico. We're going to do a story today from Politico. And basically, I comment on them, point out some differences of opinions I have, some things you might not have thought about, but essentially, this is an opinionated show. It's news in the sense that we use current news stories, but we don't create news. We don't really do investigative journalism here. We are social commentary. And I guess that under the current freedom of speech that we are being allowed to act under, that having a difference of opinion is no longer comes under the First Amendment. Because that seems to be what's happening here. I just say that to say that, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to do everything we can to stay on all of these basic social media networks. We're not going to change our show radically unless you want us to, as the listeners. But we're going to keep telling the truth the best we possibly can. And we're going to do it in a hopefully a seriously entertaining way. That's kind of one of the goals here. And we've been pretty successful so far, mostly because of you, the listeners. And I also tell you all the time that you've got to be very proactive. We've got to have more listeners on places like YouTube. You got to share our show far and wide. I mean, we're on places like Rumble and BitChute as well, so check that out. And you need in America's Voice News, share our show far and wide, and because we're under attack, and we must be doing something right if we're wrong. All right, so we're going to move along here. We're going to start with a story from Illinois City approves first spending on reparations. Evanston, Illinois, and we're going to get into the details of it here in just a minute, has now actually not only passed reparations programs, but is starting to put money towards reparations, and we'll tell you what that means. And then COVID, this is a Politico story we're going to do, COVID at the southern border. There are mixed reactions to what is happening. There are all kind of different reports coming out in along the Texas, Arizona, and California border. And we're going to talk about what the Biden administration is doing and not doing when it comes to COVID and prevention of escalation of COVID disease, COVID-19 and Corona coming through the southern border. We'll talk about that. But before we go any further, we have to always mention our sponsors. In this case, our number one sponsor is Big Daddy Unlimited, BDU. Now, all of our sponsors can be found by looking above the video, no matter where or when you're watching it. You'll see a description of our show. You'll see links in there to our sponsors, one of which is Big Daddy Unlimited, your Second Amendment headquarters, because they give you factory direct pricing delivered directly to your door, guns and ammunition, over 100,000 other items, including tactical gear, survival gear, even swag, and they defend your Second Amendment rights on a daily basis. So we greatly appreciate Big Daddy Unlimited. Couldn't do the show without them. PatriotThreads.org is an organization I've been affiliated with now for a couple of years. They're apparel with a purpose. They're a fulfillment center. What they can do is help you with charity events. They can design t-shirts, ship them out where you want them to go, patriotic theme, and support charities of your choice, and they'll help you set all of that up. You get a 20% off in anything they do or you do with them if you use the promo code JMT, in other words, the initials of the show, John Martin Talks. Then we have Recoil TV, which has its own YouTube channel. We're archived on there. Of course, our YouTube channel is, spell it all the way out, John Martin Talks, and we certainly need more subscriptions and more views there. We really appreciate that. But Recoil TV is all about the Second Amendment as well, because their videos primarily consist of Second Amendment issues. For instance, everything from maybe particular issues you need to pay attention to actual demonstrations of the latest products and guns and ammunition and that type of thing. But they have their own TV, Recoil TV on YouTube, and we are blessed to be archived there. So check it out. All right, let's get into the meat of the show. This comes to you from a Breitbart article. Evanston, Illinois approves nation's first reparations for black residents. Now, Evanston, Illinois is basically a suburb of Chicago. It is home to Northwestern University, and very liberal from everything I can. And it's probably not hard to determine that. But let's get into the details of this. The liberal Chicago suburb of Evanston, Illinois, officially approved the first spending for reparations for black residents on Monday evening. It is the nation's first reparations program following an 8-1 vote by the local alderman in November of 2019. So they voted a couple of years ago to actually do reparations, but they had not actually funded it and had not started spending money. So they were one of the first, if not the first city to actually do a reparations. I'm not sure they're the first one to actually implement the idea of it, but they're clearly the first one to actually put real taxpayer dollars to work. And guess where the money is coming from? Where is the bling bling coming from? Wait till you hear. The city of Evanston plans to fund the reparations with a new 3% marijuana tax. So I guess they got vending places, stores. I'm not sure what their exact laws are there, if it's just medical marijuana or legalized marijuana. But I warned you, people who were all about marijuana in Florida and really across the nation, I warned you when I had a radio show 4, 5, 6 years ago, that this idea of legalized and medical marijuana was the wrong way to go. That if you actually supported, and I stand by this, if you actually supported the public use of marijuana, you should have been going all along for decriminalization of it. That's what you needed to do. And I was labeled as anti-marijuana, all that, which is wrong. I've never really come out strongly and said I'm opposed to Now, I tell you this as someone who has been in recovery now for 33 years of alcohol and drug addiction. Marijuana, and I didn't mean to get on this tangent, but let's go ahead and get on it. Marijuana is a gateway drug. I worked at a drug treatment center for 15 years. I've been clean and sober now myself for 33 years. I probably smoked enough marijuana that if they charged me a 3% tax on it, I could have probably funded their whole reparations project myself. Thank God, by the grace of God, I'm not contributing to it now. But if you don't think marijuana is a gateway drug, and I'm not saying that everybody who smokes marijuana is going to end up on heroin. That's not what I'm saying at all. But and maybe this person's out there, and you can chime in on Facebook or YouTube and tell me, but I've never met anyone in my whole career, both as a drug user and abuser myself, to 15 years working at a drug treatment center. I never met anybody that woke up one day and said, I never drank, I never smoked cigarettes, I never smoked marijuana, but today is a great day to try some crack. It don't work that way. Or meth, or a meth head, all of a sudden a meth head is born out of the blue. It don't work that way. You probably don't even know how to get it without having smoked marijuana first. So it is clearly a gateway drug, period. I'm not saying necessarily you have to make your own personal decision. But think about this. So the city of Evanston plans to fund the reparations with a new 3% marijuana tax. So pot smokers are now going to be paying people for doing nothing. Because as bad as slavery and everything is, racism, well, we're going to talk a little bit about all of it today. But you're essentially paying someone who's never been a slave, never been a victim of slavery, money. In some cases, it's like $25,000 here. We'll get into the details. From taxpayer money for nothing. They haven't done anything. Nothing has been done to them. And I'm not saying, let me just say this, get this out of the thing. I'm not saying that slavery is not still impacting our country. I think it clearly is. I had a professor, Dr. Robert Premack, University of Florida, one of the most liberal professors ever that I've ever had. He's dead now. But he was a brilliant guy. We debated all the time. And one of the things he used to say, he had what he called Premack's axiom. And he said that for whatever force there is, evil that is done, injustice that is done, it takes an equal to or longer time to come out of it for whatever's done. And he used to use slavery specifically as an example. He would say, like, for instance, if slavery has existed, of course, slavery has existed since the dawn of man. But when you talk about African slavery, which is what this is talking about here, Black Africans, not necessarily just Americans, it lasted about 400 years. So according to Dr. Premack, we're going to feel the ramifications of that for at least 400 years. And I don't think he was wrong about that. Now, that does not mean that reparations is any solution. It is to look at things and cultural things and see where they came from. Like, for instance, I'll give you a quick example. The black church is uniquely connected to the black community more than probably any other. I'm talking about Christian churches. And the reason goes back to slavery. Because on the plantations, the large plantations, they would allow, because they were Christians. I know that sounds kind of, there's hypocrisy. Human beings always fall short of the glory. There's a book out there somewhere that talks about it. But one of the few places that slaves could be separated and not being constantly watched by their white overseers was in church. So the black church took on a center of the black community that white churches never did because of slavery. It's just a fact. It's not, I'm just putting it out there. I'm not making an opinion on it one way or another. But if you want to understand why, for instance, if you want to talk about white supremacy, why the KKK and other groups like that attacked black churches specifically, it was because they understood the unique relationship between the black community and the black church and the sanctuary aspect of it. And they knew they could tear right at the heart of the black community by burning or bombing a church. That's why they did it. So understanding our history is important. But I don't know that necessarily means that we need to do reparations. I just don't see, let me just say this and we'll get more into it in a second. If I could wave a magic wand and somehow money would solve all the ramifications of black slavery in this country, I think most of us would probably be for it. I just don't think it works. I don't see how it works. And I think it probably causes more problems than it actually solves. And we'll get into that as we go on. Local leaders eye marijuana dispensaries as an attractive source of revenue. I warned you guys about that, man. You put the government in charge of pot, man, and it's not a good thing. Source of revenue to reverse what they call the ongoing impact of institutional racist and persisting effects of slavery. Racist and persistent effects of slavery. Continuous. Now keep in mind that the state of Illinois entered the Union in 1818. It was admitted as a free state. About 50 years basically before the Civil War, right? So Illinois, and I'm not absolving them of racism. I'm not saying there weren't still like the Jim Crow laws and those kind of things in Illinois. But it was not a slave state for the, couple of 100 years now, just about. So I don't know, how much is slavery actually impacting the citizens of Evanston, Illinois right now? That's a question. And does money, if there is an impact, does simply giving money resolve that impact, or does it create other wounds or fractures? I think that's more likely. The fund will be capped, this, I guess, pot tax fund. The fund will be capped at $10 million, according to the City of Evanston staff reports. City estimates project the marijuana tax could generate $500,000 to $750,000 per year. Quite a few pot smokers in Evanston, apparently. The newspaper noted. Some of this is coming from the Chicago Tribune. But let me ask, so they're going to cap the fund at $10 million. Why? Why would you cap the fund? If you truly believe that you owe reparations to obviously it'd be descendants of former slaves in Evanston. If you actually believe that you owe reparations, hey, that's certainly a political opinion you could have. I think there's personal things you could do, but if you believe in using taxpayer dollars to make reparations and you believe that's going to be some kind of solution, then why in the world would you cap it at $10 million? Doesn't make any sense. If you go back to what that professor I was talking about was saying, this thing could last another few hundred years as far as the ramifications, social and cultural things of slavery. So why cap it at $10 million if you truly believe that it is going to actually work? Well, I can tell you why. Because they don't believe this stuff. And I'm going to give you more evidence in just a few minutes. But these progressives don't believe most of the crap they put out there. And this is an excellent example. They're virtue signaling. That's all this really is. Now, I'm not saying the 10 million might make a difference in some people's lives. Money's always good to have in your pocket. Change we could spend. But if it actually is somehow scientifically proved that it's going to make a lasting difference and make real reparations for harm done, then why would you ever cap it? It doesn't make any sense to me unless it is just for show. Dough for show, which I think it is. The resolution approved Monday directs initial funding of $400,000 from the city's local reparations fund to a housing program that will award eligible individuals up to $25,000. So it directs money. First of all, the first part of reparations is going to help people, and I got a list here in just a minute, but it does with a housing program. So one thing about slaves, they had housing, right? So I don't know. It's just crazy. According to Kimberly Richardson, interim assistant city manager, the money can be used to help with a home down payment or closing cost assistance. I guess you have to be a certain qualification. We're going to get, they list the qualifications in a minute here. Cost assistance within the city. Help pay for repairs, improvements, or modernizations of an Evanston property, or help pay down mortgage principal, interest, or late penalties on Evanston property. So please tell me how slavery 200 years ago, basically, is impacting whether or not a person can make their mortgage payment today. I'm not sure I see the connection there. Now, maybe if I smoked enough medical marijuana, maybe it would come to me. I don't know. But so they're going to cap this fund. They're going to take money from pot smokers, cap the fund at $10 million, and start off paying a $400,000 up to $25,000 a shot for people to make their mortgage payments or maybe do Home Depot repairs. Now, how this connects to slavery, I'm not sure. And if anything, wouldn't it divide the community more? What if I'm living in a neighborhood and I'm an old white dude and next to me is an old black dude and we happen to be friends and maybe we worked at the same factory for years, that kind of thing, because that happens all the time. And we both need repairs done to our home, but Joe over here, he's getting $25,000 from the city to fix up his house, which means his value of his house goes up. The value of my house goes down because it's in greater state of disrepair. All because he's black and I'm white. The only difference between us is that he's black and I'm white. I mean, doesn't that drive a wedge between neighbors? To me, even if you think that they're trying to do the right thing, it's going to cause more problems than it could possibly fix, in my opinion, Mr. Algorithm. To qualify, an applicant must have origins in any of the black, listen to this, origins in any of the black racial and ethnic groups of Africa. According to the memo, applicants must also be a black resident of Evanston between 1919, which was long after the Civil War, 1919 and 1969, or that person's direct descendant. So you're actually going to have people that may not have been slaves at all actually getting potential reparations for this, right? I mean, if you listen to the thing, and here's the black racial and ethnic groups of Africa. So I get black racial. I can, there's various tones and all that kind of stuff. But what's the ethnic part? I mean, I don't totally get that. Are you saying that, for instance, because ethnic usually refers, not always, but usually refers to minority populations. Well, you take, for instance, South Africa. South Africa's minority population is white, not black. And some of those in South Africa have been there long before the slave trade even started. And I'm not condoning any of that. I'm not excusing apartheid, none of that stuff. But how do you determine an ethnic group? And then, of course, there are Muslims in the northern part of Africa that are practicing slavery as we speak. Black slavery, yes. And this is something nobody wants to talk about. There's more human slavery happening in the world right this minute as we speak than ever in the entire history of the world. And there are tens of thousands of people in like Darfur and other regions in northern Africa, blacks, that are enslaved by Muslims as we speak, that are enslaved by Arabs, not black Muslims, Arabs. Now, they're an ethnic group as well. So is someone who may be an ancestor or a direct relation, maybe a cousin today, to someone having black slavery in Africa, are they going to, under this rule, actually be able to have reparations from the city of Evanston? I mean, this stuff is really crazy and gets complicated and makes no sense to me whatsoever. It doesn't solve the problem unless your problem is virtue signaling. That's all it does. That's all this is about, is virtue signaling with taxpayer dollars. But ethnic, if you don't believe, it says relating to a population, here's the definition, subgroup within a larger dominant national cultural group with a common national or cultural tradition. So you don't even have to be black under that if you use, and believe me, lawyers will love this kind of language. Applicants also qualify if they've experienced housing discrimination due to the city's policies or practices after 1969. After 1969, which means it has nothing. It is literally 200 years since they actually had slaves in Illinois. And they never officially had them under statehood because it goes back to 1818, I believe. Is there no end to this? It sounds like to me they're going to cap the fund at $10 million, but there's no end to the virtue signaling forever, I suppose. Evanston is one of the most liberal towns in the nation. It is also home to Northwestern University, I told you that, and was once, I did not know this part, was once an important center of the temperance movement, the anti-drinking movement. And how'd that work out? It didn't work out too good. It basically established a mob in Illinois, right? The anti-temperance movement. Well, let me just ask you this, ladies and gentlemen, we'll move along. I wonder, are they going to have a bag test? You know what I'm talking about? A paper bag test. Out in Louisiana, in New Orleans with Mardi Gras, give you a little history here. They have all these groups, and Mardi Gras is great, man. If you ever get a chance, I don't know how they're going to do it these days, but in the past, I've had a blast. I love New Orleans. I love the state of Louisiana. But they had these groups, basically kind of like fraternities, if you will. And there were black groups and white groups, and they put on these floats and these parades and various parades. Well, in the black groups, they were very, very adamant about skin tone, more than the white. I mean, let's face it, the blacks were not going to be in the white groups. That's just the way it is. But there was a lot of segregation and racial profiling, if you will, within the black community. They literally had a bag test. They would take a brown paper bag like you get from the grocery store, and if your skin tone was darker than that bag, there were certain Mardi Gras groups you couldn't participate in. And this was black on black racism. So where does that come in? And then you get complicated. I've mentioned this group before, the Buffalo Soldiers. How many of you have heard of the Buffalo Soldiers? This was a group of African Americans, most of them, if not all of them, former slaves that fought for the Union Army in the Civil War. Nothing. By the way, Black Lives Matter attacked that memorial to not the Buffalo Soldiers, but the black Union soldiers, like from the movie Glory. But after the Civil War was over, these highly trained soldiers, all black, were sent out west to essentially, I'm just going to tell it like it is, murder Indians. That's what it was about. And they were very, very good at it. And I'm not absolving whites at all. But the Buffalo Soldiers were very efficient at killing Native Americans. So I say that to say, okay, so let's say that you're a descendant of someone, a black descendant from someone in Evanston, Illinois, and you were a Buffalo Soldier. Does that mean that your descendants then need to turn around and pay reparations to the Native Americans that were killed and displaced? Because believe me, they were. And this next statistic I'm going to show you, I will say up front, was probably 99, if not 100% white folks, but it kind of shows you what I'm talking about. In 1800, because the state of Illinois is named Illinois for the Illini Indians. There were two main Indian tribes in early Illinois, the Illini and the Miami. That's why there's like Miami, Ohio, and Miami was a tribe, smaller tribe. But in 1800, there were only about 150 Illini Indians left in all of Illinois in 1800. Now, keep in mind, in 1819, I think it was, is when they became a free state and entered the Union, right? So I say all that to say that, man's inhumanity to man really knows no limits. And I'm not justifying slavery whatsoever. It was America's original sin. There's no question about it. And we are still paying the consequences of that today. I just can't see how money given to people based solely on race is going to help any of the races, if you want to put it that way. Because I can tell you this, one thing that's human nature, if you get something for nothing, I don't care what it is, if you get something for nothing, you don't value it, and it doesn't help you with your own self-esteem. So to me, this can absolutely backfire. And I got to ask, and some people may be offended by this, but if we keep going down the road we're on right now in this country, I think and this doesn't have anything to do with race, except I guess, the ethnic group of American citizens under the U.S. Constitution. Our Constitution is being destroyed. I make the case on a daily basis that our nation is being taken from us by the progressives, Democrats in this case. And I've told you my number one political goal is to stop the progressive takeover of this nation, which I firmly believe is happening. And I think I make a good case for it on a daily basis. So am I going to get reparations when you destroy our nation? Are all of us American citizens, regardless of race, creed, or color, going to get reparations for whatever's left once the progressive take over? Because remember what their motto basically is. And this is my opinion, YouTube. But I think when you look at the Democratic Party, which has been taken over by the hardcore leftists, their basic thing is America sucks. And this is where these reparations come in. America sucks. It's always sucked. It sucks for some more than others. And if you vote us in and let us take over this nation, we're going to make it suck for everybody equally. Tell me where I'm wrong. All right, we got a few minutes left. I want to get into some things that are happening down at the border. And it's not getting a whole lot of attention, not this particular aspect. And I want to educate you on something that many of you might not know when it comes to people are always asking me, how many people are coming over? Where are they going? All that kind of stuff. And this article in Politico talking about COVID issues down there is opening up a situation that we really need to talk about. So let's get into it. Biden administration scrambles to avert COVID outbreaks at the southern border. This is Politico now. And this is a very liberal publication, and they're questioning the Biden administration, and they're pointing out some stuff. All right. The federal government, the federal government does not have a centralized system for tracking or responding to COVID-19 cases among the surge of migrants crossing the United States southern border. This is Politico, according to interviews with 6 senior Biden administration, officials and multiple individuals tasked with responding to the influx. So I go back, excuse me, I'm still feeling a little effects here. But I go back to Biden's speech the other night where he addressed the COVID issue. I really wanted to address that head up, but of course I was recovering from COVID myself. If you're new to the show, I talked about it in depth on Thursday, last week. Check it out. But Biden did a speech and he talked about COVID. I want to play about a minute excerpt from it because he's telling you that you might actually get the privilege of celebrating Independence Day, which is kind of important in this country. And then we'll come back and talk about it. Check it out.
I will not relent until we beat this virus, but I need you. The American people, I need you. I need every American to do their part. And that's not hyperbole. I need you. I need you to get vaccinated when it's your turn and when you can find an opportunity. And to help your family, your friends, your neighbors get vaccinated as well. Because here's the point. If we do all this, if we do our part, if we do this together, by July the 4th, there's a good chance you, your families and friends will be able to get together in your backyard or in your neighborhood and have a cookout or a barbecue and celebrate Independence Day. That doesn't mean large events with lots of people together, but it does mean small groups will be able to get together. After this long, hard year, that will make this Independence Day something truly special, where we not only mark our independence as a nation, but we begin to mark our independence from this virus.
I'm telling you, these people, these hardcore leftists, which is what Biden is, they're either don't believe the crap they're putting out there, or if they do, I don't know how else to put it, they're evil people. Because think about what he is saying there. He is saying, telling you, you, an American citizen, might get to celebrate, if you do what I tell you to do. I need you. If you do what I tell you to do, you might get to have a picnic at your house. Did you ever think we would come to a point in our country, and I could see this coming for a while, pandemic or not, that we would have a president of the United States telling you he may or may not give you permission to have a cookout at your house. And every time I'm coughing a little bit here, it makes me actually mad. Because if he actually believes the BS, the malarkey that he's putting out there, so if he believes that COVID, and I'm not saying it's not, by the way, I'm living proof that it is, that it is a threat to the health and welfare of the citizens of this great country. If he truly believes that, then how can he have an open border policy and have hundreds of thousands, not 2 or 3, but over 100,000 in February alone coming across the border, that we know by the government's own statistics that about 7% of them are testing positive? That's the ones we're actually catching and testing, and we're not testing everybody. I'm going to get into that in a minute. If he truly believes that COVID is the threat that it is, and think about this, ladies and gentlemen, there's now one of these variants that is actually called the Brazilian variant because it is coming from South America. Well, where is it coming to? It's coming into the United States of America. That's obvious. A blind man could see it. And so if he really is serious that COVID is that big of a threat, then how can you justify saying there's no crisis at the border and letting people come in? And it is worse, as you will see in just a second, than they're letting you know. Much, much worse. And it is not confined to just Texas, Arizona, and California. Check this out. The Biden administration has outsourced, this is very important, outsourced most COVID-19 testing and quarantining for migrants to local health agencies, which means like the county or the state. That's one thing. That's governmental. And non-governmental organizations. This is a critical detail. They call them NGOs. But it's unclear how many have been tested for the virus, how many have tested positive, and where infected people are being isolated along the border. 4 of the senior administration officials told Politico. This NGO component is critical to understand the crisis and how it is a direct threat to the health of Americans everywhere. Non-governmental organizations, NGOs. Here's something you may or may not know. And this is a very simplistic explanation, but it's true. If the government, being the federal government, takes in an illegal alien, regardless of infection or not, and takes that person and releases them into, say, Texas, or puts them on a bus and takes them to, say, North Carolina or Florida or anywhere, if it's the government doing it, then they are by law required to inform Texas or Florida or North Carolina that we are moving an illegal immigrant, alien, into your jurisdiction. They're required by that. But here's the big one. These non-governmental organizations, NGOs, are not required to do that. You hear me? Are not. So if a busload of people are put in a bus by the Biden administration, say they come across the border in Texas and are shipped to North Carolina, which is happening, by the way. North Carolina is supposed to, by federal law, be notified. But if one of these non-governmental organizations, and there are a ton of them, and there are some that are specifically designed to skirt the law, if they are put, that same group of people is put in a bus and sent to Montana, they don't have to tell you squat. A lot of people don't know that. And most of these people are going through these NGOs. The scramble to track COVID cases at the border also shows that a year into the pandemic, the U.S. still doesn't have the monitoring and communication system needed to aggressively combat outbreaks of infectious disease and necessary for return to normal. So I use the Democrat. Let me check my time. I use the Democrats saying here, if true, which you can say anything right after that. If true, then how is it that we don't have a crisis at the border right now? If you can't test these people and you can't in any adequate way track where they're going and how the virus, either Joe Biden is full of crap and what he's saying, he doesn't believe what he's saying, and I think he probably does believe what he's saying. And that means something much more nefarious. Because think about it. If you really believe that COVID-19 is a direct threat to the health and welfare of the United States of America, but you're letting people knowingly coming in, that knowingly infected with other variants and everything else, and you're not even able to track them, you admit it yourself, and they'll admit this in just a moment, then how does that stack up against a term like super spreader? I mean, keep in mind this, ladies and gentlemen. When I told you earlier, I used to work at a drug treatment center for 15 years back in the 80s and into the 90s. And I occasionally used to work at the detox unit. Now, this group was a do-gooder bunch, pretty liberal people. All right? I'm not necessarily criticizing. I'm just telling you. Social workers. That's what they were for the most part. Do you know that I had training and it used to be required about illegal immigrants? And this is way before COVID, because it was known fact that things like tuberculosis were highly prevalent in these immigrants that were coming across the border. Things that we had pretty much eradicated, polio, smallpox, all these kind of things. We were trained to look for these types of things. We were tested to see if we had them, if we worked with these people. And it was specifically told to us, a bunch of liberal social workers for the most part, that we needed to identify these people and protect ourselves from them and notify the upper food chain about it. Now, do you really think, so I think it was true then, do you really think that's gotten better? I mean, COVID covers everything. Nobody dies of anything yet. But there are all kinds of infectious diseases that have been coming across the border for decades, probably forever. And you don't hear about it. Just sharing a little experience. One of the more than 100,000 migrants, illegal aliens, who were apprehended or turned themselves over to the officials on the border in February, over 100,000, as many as 28,000 were allowed to remain in the country. And that's the ones were. Did you see there were some pictures released over the last couple of days of these facilities, and they got people packed in there like sardines? There ain't no social distancing happening, that's for sure. While they wait to be united with vetted sponsors and some parents with young children released while their asylum claims are evaluated. The government's own statistics from about a month ago. It's a public health crisis at the border than the Trump administration did. That's a lie, flat out. The Trump administration had pretty much shut the. You could argue whether they should have or not, but they definitely weren't having 100,000 people a month coming across there. Let me get about out of time. I want to read this one thing. Let me scroll down here. Here we go. 4 senior administration officials across the nation's top health organizations. This is Politico saying this out of mind. For Disease Control, Health, HHS, and FEMA told Politico they did not. Went down there. But I guess Billy kick here, if you had, he's got a Twitter handle. It's at Billy Bob Bass. Mayorkas said based organizations, that's these NGOs, anything, to test migrants who are released to local communities. Said the department works states have the capacity to test and quarantine. He says this when he said that's a non-government to test individuals who test positive and then transported to facilities. So, do you trust what's coming out of the Biden administration? Because by their own have to report anything. Let me give you a quick example. Or I guess it's McAllen, Texas. The city recently put those that test positive are offered hotels. Wow. McAllen, Texas said. He said, crisis in our city, NGO non-governmental organizations, our hands. They're not a threat to McAllen, Texas. Now, where are they taking these people? All over the United States. I got countless. This is the last thing. The truth. Here's what the truth comes out. This is from Politico, I remind you, talking to Biden administration. Local officials and NGO leaders all that migrants cannot be forced to quarantine if they test positive because they are already out destinations which are outside of the border. what I've been saying. It's all happening at the state level. Federal government is washing their hands of it. And even charities, I'm not all of them. They may have good intentions, but they're putting in it is becoming a super spreader. Said if together and directly to our YouTube